We'll talk projecting the Bengals offense and breaking down the Browns coming up next on the Wincinnati Podcast.
Yes, sir. Hello, world. We got a special show as always. TJ Houshmandzada, Jimmy Chase, Coach Jimmy Burrow.
How do you balance being a professional athlete and family obligation?
Need your top 5 Bengals of all time.
All time, man? Yeah. Shock the world.
Welcome to the Wincinnati Podcast. I'm your host, Ace Boogie. He is my co-host, Zim. Zim, say what's up.
What's going on? Hello, world. How's everybody doing this beautiful evening? I got somewhat of the sun in my backdrop. I'm feeling lovely. I'm feeling amazing as usual. Ryan was witnessing my glory earlier where people were absolutely hating me online on Twitter Spaces, on my normal routine, bodying team after team, person after person. It's just part of a lifestyle. I heard people say, "Oh, here comes them," like in a room. I'm like, I'm just here just to observe and get information, but this type of stuff happens to me now. I've got a bad rap online, I guess. But aside from that, I think we're having some really healthy debates and getting some good information along the way. And I'm hoping we get some really good information today as well.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to kick things off talking about the Browns and them saying bye to Baker. As we know, he's been traded. We're also going to talk about projecting the Bengals offense in 2022 later in the show. And then we're going to get to the schedule breakdown, which we have a special guest to bring in for that on breaking down the Browns.
Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go!
All right, Zim. It was announced today that Ken Anderson and Ken Riley were named semifinalists for the 2023 Pro Football Hall of Fame class. That is definitely great news, especially me being a Florida A&M alumni. Ken Riley did some great things for that university. This is a guy that played in an era where they didn't throw the ball, still top 5 in interceptions. So glad that he's getting his just due here. It's obviously the job is not finished. I mean, Ken Anderson, obviously another guy that really deserved to get that nod into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But what are your thoughts on just these two guys being named as semifinalists as Bengals?
Very exciting times. I wasn't, I was very, very young. So I didn't get a chance to watch these guys play like live on every Sunday, but I've done my due diligence over the years, watching guys play, looking at some of the things that they've done. In fact, if you are listening to this now, you've never seen it. Ace, myself, and his cousin, we did a really good documentary too on Ken Riley. Please make sure y'all go to YouTube, search that right now, Ken Riley documentary. I think over time, too, we've had some good relationships with Ken Riley Jr. He gave his nod and his approval, so it's good to see him as a semifinalist for this. So I'm really, really excited for that. One of the things that we get told daily is that Bengals don't have guys in the Hall of Fame, and I'm like, we got guys that deserve it, but, they just don't let it happen. So I'm always a little bit reluctant when they get to this stage, but I'm trying to put some good energy in the air, and I just think it's well deserved. Long overdue. There's many guys that are in the Hall that don't have the resume. Not going to single anyone out, but they don't have the resume of Ken Anderson or Ken Riley. So I think it's well deserved, and I'm really, really excited about it.
No, that's facts. That brings a smile to my face. Speaking of smiles, Zim, we want to talk about a friend of the show in Pierce Dental Group in the Natty.
Yes, sir. So I've been harping on this, going in on this every single time we have a show now. Pierce Dental Group, I've got my free consultation with them. I don't live in the Cincinnati area. You too can get a free consultation, no charge. Just go to Pierce Dental Group's website. Also go follow them on Twitter, Instagram with Dr. Troy Pierce. If you are in the Cincinnati area, you can go see them downtown, Fountain Square. A lot of the Bengals players, this is their dentist. So you're working with the best. I think that's really important that we're supporting the best and we're keeping it all in the family, I guess, in that regard. But take your smile to the next level. Make sure that you go and talk to them and get your free consultation. Confidence starts here. Really excited to be working with them on this.
For sure, for sure. And now we're going to bring in our special guest. He covers the Browns. We're going to bring in a friend of the show, Quincy Carrier. Quincy, what's up, bro?
How you guys doing today, man?
Pretty good. Well, obviously, bro, we have talked at lengths about Baker. The trade has finally happened.
Just go straight into the.
What are your thoughts on it? Because I know I've told you, I'm like, bro, you don't want the Andy Dalton situation. Don't put the pen to the paper. You guys got him out of there. How are you feeling about the trade?
I mean, look, at the end of the day, we've been waiting for this chapter to change ever since week 16 of last year, right? Where he told the media he was not going to play the next game. He told us that he was going to only consult his wife about that and his agent. And he kind of just quit on the team at that point, right? Like at that point, it was a wrap on the future of Baker Mayfield in Cleveland, at least for any long-term length. So, we just been kind of waiting to see what's next. The Watson trade happens. This whole thing's been in a weird limbo with Baker Mayfield, where it's like, what are we going to do with him? And, it's kind of like when Ben Simmons was on the 76ers. The most annoying part about having Baker on the roster was everybody who had all the articles about Baker on the roster. Browns were never going to play Baker, no matter what happens with the Watson situation this year. They had decided they were done for many reasons. Some that will come out soon, some that have already come out the second they have traded him, right? There's been issues where, he thought he had a higher status on the team than Myles Garrett. There were issues where, he wanted to talk privately with Kevin Stefanski, which Kevin Stefanski did do and did take that opportunity to tell him that he was not playing well every week that he did that. It's been an awkward situation for the longest. I know that if you look at Baker's compensation from the standpoint of he was a number 1 overall pick and you only got a conditional 5th, you can look at it and say that's a failure on the trade standpoint. The way I look at it is you were looking dead in the face of releasing him and eating $18 million come September. The fact that you only eat 10, maybe you get a 4th round pick, maybe you get a 5th out of this. That's fine, honestly. It's just finally just letting this move on so all the Baker bros can go be Carolina Panther fans. And we can just head on to the next chapter, which ironically is a week 1 meeting with Baker Mayfield, which I'm sure this defense is excited to see him week 1.
But don't you think Baker's going to be excited to see you?
Yeah, I've seen that. You know what I mean? Like, the Baker with the grudge can go either way, right? Like, He had the grudge thing against Hugh Jackson, and it worked out the first couple of times he played Cincinnati. But, I've also seen him have a grudge against Cliff Kingsbury and have 2 of the worst football games I've seen a Browns quarterback have, especially one that's not terrible. And Baker's not terrible. He just wasn't the dude that was right for the job. So, we'll see. Baker Mayfield puts no fear in my heart. I have seen the good and bad with him. I know what the good can look like. I know what it requires for him to get the good, and I know what the bad can look like.
It's like the Andy Dalton situation with us. At first, when we first got rid of Andy, we were just like, nah, we're not worried about Andy. But the crazy thing is, I think we might be, are we 0-2 against Andy since in every matchup? I think it was the Dallas matchup and the Bears matchup where he was in for like a little bit but got knocked out.
I was about to say he got hurt in the game, but they won the game though, right?
Yeah, like Baker, like Quincy said, Baker is a petty dude, bro. He's going to be trying to get locked in. I want to see if he's going to try to do something on the sidelines with Stefanski. But that's the part of Baker Mayfield that a lot of people didn't trade for him for, right? Because the extraness that kind of comes with that. Like, even when he did the Hugh Jackson thing, like, I was kind of like, at the time, I was like, that's kind of immature, bro. Like, to be able to just run over to your former coach and do that, like, yeah, you're winning and all of that, but I think that it just speaks to, like, the immaturity and some of the issues that the Browns will no longer have to deal with. The only thing is, like, if Deshaun Watson, which we don't know what the suspension is, if you have to go against him with Jacoby Brissett, that's the only part where I'm like, I don't know. But that is the defense that went against him in practice and probably knows every single tendency. So I've seen it go both ways. We've seen it go in our favor when we had to face Carson Palmer that first time when he was on the Raiders. And then we've seen it go the other way with like Andy the last 2 games. But then what are your thoughts on just the whole trade scenario in general?
I was going to say, when Quincy brought up about no fear in his heart, on Baker, I have a theory. I feel like everyone now is like very quick to say, Oh yeah, Baker. I mean, he saved the Browns franchise, and like the outside people looking into Cleveland, right? Because he wins the playoff game and stuff like that. And I see that every day on Twitter. And I feel like nobody was saying that when he was an active member of the team, because I don't know if they feared him then. But now that he's not a threat, it's like all these people coming out the woodworks to like congratulate him on like, you know, winning this playoff game and giving him like, they're like overreaching to be like, yeah, Baker, he actually was really good and stuff like that. And then in contrast, outside of the off the field stuff with Deshaun Watson, it's a whole group of people that just want to try to diminish anything that he's ever done, put a microscope on his playoff stuff to try to make him not look like a top 10, top 5 quarterback in the league because they fear him. Me being the ultra competitor that I am, I'm like, I want this dude out there. I cannot take a second of my life of a Browns fan telling me how they beat the Bengals and look, I don't care about them beating the Bengals, right? But say I beat the Bengals. I'm already ready for every single one of them to be like, oh, well, we didn't have Deshaun. You see what I'm saying? But I think I'm on the outside, like kind of that. Most of the people that I encounter with every day, they try to make Deshaun Watson feel like he's not like an elite quarterback so that they can like kind of get over their fear. Whereas I'm like, I know he's an elite quarterback and I know in their system a run, you know what I'm saying? Like we're talking about the best running team in all of football. And this guy, all he has to do is move the chains on third down. So like, that's the other part of this.
Yeah, and it's been like this weird thing where there are people who are legitimately upset about the off the field stuff with Deshaun Watson. There are people who don't care about any of that. And then there are people who only care about the off the field stuff with Deshaun Watson because they were mega Baker Mayfield fans or have an attachment to Baker Mayfield. And I've said this one all off season because I think the second it became clear that the Browns were going to move on, that's when like this rush from people to say, oh, Baker saved the Browns in 2018. And I always hold people off. Was Baker a part of the quote unquote turnaround? I wouldn't call one over 500 season in 4 years like a full turnaround, but was he a part of like the Browns being not last place? Sure, he was a part of it, but he wasn't the driving force. 2018, the same draft, Baker Mayfield goes number 1 overall. They draft Denzel Ward and Nick Chubb. Those are two of the best players at their position, two legit all-pro, all-NFL players. Baker Mayfield was never a Pro Bowler, let alone all-NFL anything. So the fact that all of this credit, Jarvis Landry also signed in that free agency period too, but the fact that all this credit got lopped on the Baker Mayfield, right? You talk about the playoff game. Everybody goes to the playoff game. The Steelers spotted the Browns 28 points in the first quarter. All he had to do was not mess it up, and he didn't. He played a good game, but it wasn't this overwhelming effort by, quite frankly, anybody on the offense or really anybody in the Cleveland Browns to win that game. It was just us taking advantage of Pittsburgh just playing awful in that game, right? They just fumbled a snap over their head, like things that the Browns didn't even force happen in that first quarter. Ben was playing awful football, just uncharacteristically bad, at least against the Cleveland Browns. And that led to that. But somehow this is all turned to it was all Baker Mayfield. And I get that we have this need to put everything on the quarterback position, but nobody who played the Browns or scouted against the Browns was afraid of the Browns because of Baker. It was Nick Chubb. It was Myles Garrett, right? I make all the jokes about Baker Mayfield's record versus Joe Burrow, but we all know the real reason the Browns have been able to get the better of Joe Burrow has been because of Myles Garrett. You can go back and count like literally two strip sacks he has had in critical moments on Joe Burrow to swing the tide of these games that have been like one possession, you know? So it's really been the defense. It's really been Myles that has been the driving force of it. That those are the people that you fear when you play the Browns. Baker has been a part of it, but like the fact that we gave this dude so much credit to the point to where like, I mean, people sound like they want to put his number up in the Ring of Fame after this. And this is wild to me. You know what I mean?
Let me say this though. If the Bengals had a Baker Mayfield in the Andy Dalton era, the Bengals would have had a playoff win. If you go look at the Andy Dalton performances, we're talking like I'm talking one touchdown. One touchdown, 4 games. Like if he would have just played like even in the Kansas City game, you know, when the last time that me and you talked, I referenced that game. I felt like the skill positions failed you all in the Kansas City game, where the dude fumbles into the end zone. There's different things that I'm pretty sure we could go into a long discussion on it. But Baker Mayfield wasn't the reason I thought that y'all lost that Kansas City game, as much as he didn't really do much in the Steelers game. But had the Cincinnati Bengals, maybe I'm just giving you a different perspective. Had they had one Baker Mayfield-like performance in the playoffs, I wouldn't be telling people, like, I got my first victory for 31 years. Like, I'd have been had
them. The thing is, though, and I think I've told Quincy about this, like, think about that Chiefs game, right? They get into position to get to the Super Bowl. Pat Mahomes leaves the game, right? So, like, I'm thinking in my head, even as a Bengals fan, the Browns are about to go to the Super Bowl. Like, they just got the luckiest break ever. Chad Henne's coming in. Like, I'm like, this is the time that Baker Mayfield has to step up and lead the Browns to this victory, right? And it didn't happen. And so it's like, when you get into those situations, even though he played better than
he played better in that game than the Steelers game.
Yeah, right, I would say that he played better in the Chiefs game than he played against the Steelers.
Go look at that game.
Yeah, most of the yards that he had on that.
Look at the time when he was supposed to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, you're talking about the drive after the interception by Carl Jackson. Yeah, I know what you're talking about there. Exactly. And he didn't do anything there. I think they went like 2 run plays that got knocked back behind the line of scrimmage, and it was just a faulty drive from there on out. Right. But the thing is, I think that what Browns fans saw and what the front office saw were 2 different things, right? What I saw was like, oh, yeah, you put around Baker, he's going to be pretty good. He played pretty good at the end of the season. I was all in on that, right? But what I think the front office saw on him was, man, we had everything perfect around him, and we only got to the divisional round of the playoffs. I don't think this is the dude we want to go with. And what happened in 2021 was, the labrum was a part of it, but that wasn't the main part of the reason he was so inconsistent. He's been inconsistent. And that's the main issue with Baker Mayfield is the inconsistency. You can't rely on a car you don't know is going to start every day to get to work, right? Like that just isn't how you want to live your life. And with Baker Mayfield, sometimes the car starts, no problem, no check engine light, we good, we zooming, right? Sometimes you start that car and it don't work at all. Nothing's turning on, and you stuck in the driveway letting the Patriots score 45 unanswered on you because you can't do nothing to move the ball. And when you have a team, and I know people outside of Cleveland don't understand how the fan base turned on them so fast, but this team had Super Bowl expectations in 2021 and 2019, and they went under 500 twice. And they went under 500 twice, not because the defense was bad, because the offense was historically awful. In both of not historically, but awful in both of those years, right? 2019, all the interceptions Baker Mayfield threw. If it weren't for Jameis throwing a league high 30, he would have led the league by a large margin in interceptions that year. In 2021, I mean, if you just watch any game that year, I mean, the Minnesota and the Detroit game are the biggest examples of him. Yeah, certainly not putting up a bad stat line. If you look at it in total, it's not the worst stat line you ever seen. But if you watch that play to play, the misses, the length of those misses sometimes were just so hard to watch that it became frustrating that it felt like you were having a quarterback who was playing blind at times. And when you have high expectations, I don't care what fan base you are. I don't care what you're used to. You know, I know Bengals fans hear this all the time because any franchise that hasn't won the Super Bowl, people think you got to be happy with going 10-6 for the rest of your life. But it don't matter what your franchise is. If you have Super Bowl expectations, that is an accelerator to either run your ass out of town or run your ass back into town, right? If Joe Burrow has high expectations and he goes under 500, people are going to be skeptical like that. Because it's like, oh, what's happening? You know, what happened last year? Why aren't we doing this? Because the expectations are high. He had 2 years, sky high expectations, a lot of people watching the Browns, a lot of people looking at him, and he failed on both accounts and played awful. You know, this wasn't like the team failed around him and he was balling. That would be different. We would be with him still. But, you know, team was good. He was bad. So what are we going to do? Give him another opportunity? You know, if you're the Cleveland Browns, give him another chance to fail on those expectations when we've already seen him come very short of those expectations 2 times. You know, like how many chances do you really get? Kevin Durant's one of the best basketball players in the NBA. The Nets only gave that 2 times of failing before they were like, oh, we done. Same thing with Kyrie, both in Boston and in the Nets. You only have so many opportunities in life to fail great expectations. That's why they say they're big opportunities when the expectations are big behind you, because failing has higher consequences. You could be Sam Darnold, fell in New York all you want. People gonna give you a chance because who cares? You were in New York. There was no expectations. Nobody has any ill will on that. But if you fail with a high expectation, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. You can finish. I was gonna say this though, but I know you talked about like Baker. Do you feel like everybody, or are you saying this now that Baker Mayfield was the lead catalyst on why the Browns didn't have a successful season?
I'm saying that when you look at it, you can blame a lot of other factors on it, right? In 2019, you could say it's the coaching. You could say it was the offensive line. In 2021, you can say it was the play calling. I don't think in the labrum, right? But the problem is we're always saying if with Baker Mayfield.
Right.
Y'all don't say if with Joe Burrow, right? It's when with Joe Burrow. It ain't
you took that. You took that from me.
Yeah.
You took that from. I told you that last year, bro.
I don't know. A lot of you have been telling me a lot of things over this last year. It's been a very long year.
You said that I'm very. You said I was very dogmatic and on how I had like this no whatever for.
Yeah, because y'all didn't say if, but I didn't know because I only seen 9 games of Joe Burrow at that point. Right?
Now
it's a lot harder.
No, you said if everything and I was like, bro, I'm telling you, that sounds like Dalton, like behavior. But I would say this is one thing that we talk about. I don't know, even if you don't talk in Twitter Spaces, the Browns community on Twitter Spaces is amazing. I feel like they're well represented. It's a bunch of guys in there. But one of the points that I think is that they were saying early on in Spaces was about how Baker Mayfield was a big part of that. And then when they talked about how good their defense was and everything, which we think on paper is really good. But then we started looking at a lot of these games on how many points they gave up. 47 against the Chargers, 37 in the Cardinals, 45 in the Patriots. There's a lot of games where the defense did not step up like to the level that, you know what I'm saying? And all of the stuff that you just said, I never heard you say anything about the defense. And that was a big thing. Like one day we were debating that all day. And the defense did not show up in a lot of spots.
I would say in the first half of the season, that's definitely true. But once you got towards the end of the year, the defense really got it together. I think they were putting a lot of moving pieces together. But yeah, there were a few games where the defense just didn't have it, but the offense did, and that was a thing. The team never felt like they were in sync. But towards the end of the year, where this thing got critical, right? Because the Browns still had a chance to win the division. I mean, as late as week 14, 15. Because they could have beaten the Raiders. They missed the field goal. They lose to the Raiders with a third string quarterback in, and Baker Mayfield on Christmas throws 4 interceptions in like a half and blows that game against the Packers, which then stops them from being able to have the 2 extra wins to tie with Cincinnati and force that game for the division against the Bengals. So, when it got to that point of the season, right, the early parts, you could write off some of that on the defense, but when it got real critical and he got further away from that labrum injury where he was telling people he felt better, he felt healed, and the play got worse once the spotlight got brighter and more critical, that's where people kind of had enough, where it's like, I just don't know how often we can go back to this well, because it just seems like we've seen a lot of last drive interceptions. We've seen a lot of melting away in the fourth quarter. We've seen a lot of, boy, do we hope he gives us his drive here, and then the offense just goes away. And at that point, you kind of have had enough, right? And I think that Pittsburgh game on Monday night, where he just stood there and let TJ Watt almost get the sack record on him, and then threw a temper tantrum in the press conference, was enough. It was just like, okay, we've had enough. Like, you're not good enough for this. We thought you might have been, but you aren't good enough for this. And now you're making stuff bad. Like, the reason we had to get rid of Odell was partly because Baker felt like he was better without Odell out there. So it's like, how many sacrifices are we going to make to keep this dude afloat and his ego afloat if it's not even paying off with this play?
So the one thing I'll ask Quincy is, I totally agree with you guys moving on from Baker and taking the gamble on Deshaun Watson because he's the better quarterback. But if it's a situation, and let's just say hypothetically, because we don't know, where Deshaun Watson isn't even able to play a snap of football for the Browns, where do you guys go from there? Is it back to square one with the draft? Like, what happens with the team in that scenario?
Are you saying like if he's like banished from the NFL?
Yeah, if it's like an indefinite suspension or something like
Nah,
that.
give him a like he doesn't play most of the season.
Let's just
type
say he
notice.
doesn't play next year, but he's coming back the year after.
Oh,
Like,
they
what
just,
does
they
that
just,
look
they
like
just,
for the
they
Browns?
just
I
throw
don't even think
Jacoby
it's
Brissett
that.
out there for a year, hope they can go 10-6, maybe make the playoffs, and then roll it
That
out
is
next
see,
year.
that's why I said, what if it's an indefinite suspension forever?
Yeah,
Because
but
the
an
easy thing would
indefinite.
just be like, all right, we're just gonna put
No,
Jacoby
they
in.
can suspend Deshaun Watson for like 2-3 years, and the Browns are gonna be like, we'll just rate this out because he's young enough, right? Like they'll wait it out.
Right.
They've made the commitment already. But if it's like Deshaun Watson can never play football again or something like that, it's gonna be
Nah.
rough. Like you're probably gonna have to ship off a bunch of players, right? At that point, right? That means Nick Chubb's probably gonna get out of there. You're gonna want to recoup your first round pick somewhere. I think the only guy who could be considered safe is probably Myles Garrett. But if
Right.
you want to get your first round picks back, you probably have to get rid of Myles, but you just ain't selling no tickets to the stadium if you ain't got Myles there. So, it's probably gonna be like Denzel would be gone, all these players would be gone, and it would be a wholesale sale on the Browns. A lot of teams would get really good because the Browns do have a bunch of good players. If something like that were to go down, but even then, I don't think the Browns would do that immediately if they're like the NFL indefinitely suspends him. It would have to get a year plus into that where the NFL makes it clear he ain't never playing again. So it's a tough scenario.
Let me give you a more like I think a more realistic perspective or scenario on my. Let's say he's out the majority of the season. Do you feel like I think you said just now if Brissett is in there and he's playing let's say he played the whole entire season, you already feel like the Browns are going to win 10 games, right?
I feel like it's not out the realm of reason for them to be able to win 10 games if Jacoby Brissett plays the whole year, just because this team's good enough around him to where he don't got to do much, right? And I think he's okay with not doing much. Part of the friction with last year with Baker was he wanted to do more, and that caused the offense to be in more precarious situations and turn the ball over more often. So with Jacoby Brissett out there, it's really just going to be the Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Dearness Johnson show. They'll rely on that, and they can ride that to some wins, especially if they're competent enough on defense. So they'll probably go ahead and do something like that. But I think they feel like Jacoby Brissett is what they want if they can't have Watson for the whole year. So
and we've seen Jacoby Brissett take a bad Patriots team and win 9 games in that season as well too. So I did want to say that I thought like if you had a scenario where Deshaun Watson came back for most of the season, what is the reason? Let's say he comes back for half the season, say he doesn't, whatever. The reason that you feel strong about the 10 wins or whatever, talk to me about the strengths and the weaknesses. For me, I still look at Grant Delpit as like a guy that I want to target. I also want to target the interior level of your defense. I still have a lot of questions about your linebacking core. I have a lot of questions that don't revolve around your offensive line, which I still think is a top 3, top 5 offensive line in football. What would you say is the main catalyst to why you think you're pretty much like a shoo-in, even if Deshaun Watson doesn't play or not, 10 wins?
Yeah, I think the infrastructure of this team is pretty good, right? And when you talk about infrastructure, you're talking about like the foundation of it. I think the offensive line is really good. We got 2 of the best guards in football, in Joe Bitonio and Wyatt Teller. And then you have young tackles on the edges. I mean, like Jack Conklin's not young, but you have James Hudson, who I like a lot, played really well at the end of last year, who I think could step in if there's an injury and be a starting level right tackle. And then you look at, you got somebody like an Amari Cooper who can be a third down guy, right? Me and Ace talk about this a lot with the Ravens. With what's that guy's name that we said they wide receiver core ain't never been the same without this guy? Oh, Willie Snead,
Mike
right?
Wallace.
No, Willie Snead. It's been
Willie
like
Snead,
Willie Snead,
yeah.
where it's like they ain't never had that first down, check down guy since they had that. That's what Amari Cooper could be at a higher level for Jacoby Brissett if he's out there. And then obviously you have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, who a lot of people talk about, but what a lot of people don't talk about is Dearness Johnson, who quietly was one of the best running backs according to PFF, right? They ranked him 9th last year of all running backs. He averaged 5 yards per carry on a pretty decent sample size. I mean, he had an excellent game against the Broncos and a pretty good one, albeit against the Bengals backups in the last week of the season, in 2 victories there. So he's also a threat. They could just go run heavy. And then you look at the defense, they got Myles Garrett, they got Greg Newsome, they got Denzel Ward and JOK. And John Johnson played really well towards the end of last year. He had an awful start to last year, but he played much better at the end of the season. And I think that's going to contribute to a very strong secondary that can live with some of the weaknesses that you have in the interior. You want me to go on the weaknesses now?
One question that I have is, and I've wondered, and I don't think I've asked you this, Quincy, but like, let's say in the situation where Deshaun Watson is playing with the Browns, like this is a dude that came off of an MVP caliber season with the Texans, right? But it was more so kind of a passing offense. Like, do you feel like the Browns offense, being that the philosophy is to run the ball, puts restrictions on Deshaun Watson on like what he can do? Because like I would feel like you would want to trust the ball in Deshaun Watson's hand, passing the ball instead of handing it off. How do you feel about like his role coming into that offense with the Browns and then being able to take full advantage of those, obviously his arm, because that's what you kind of put the money up for, right?
Yeah. I mean, like I'm talking about when Jacoby Brissett's out there. But if Deshaun Watson's out there, it's not a completely different offense, but it's a different play sheet, right? Where it's like, okay, you got DW out there, you pay that man $50 million a year. He's gonna have a lot more input. He's gonna have plays that he wants to run, which is why he will, no matter how long this suspension is, which is why he's gonna play the bulk of training camp, the bulk of the preseason, and take all the snaps, because that's where you're gonna have the big playbook. If Jacoby Brissett's out there for 8 games, you're just gonna have really like 15, 20 plays that you're really going to rely on, and then like 5 extras that you're going to throw in there. So it don't take that much to get him prepared, and he's a veteran, so he should know how to do those things. But yeah, when it's Deshaun Watson out there, you'll see a lot more 11 personnel. You see a lot more shotgun. You'll see a lot more of what Deshaun wants to do, because it is going to be a little bit of a different offense with him out there. But that's what you pay him money for. And I think when Watson is out there, that's when you're going to see, the third down running backs really shine, right? Kareem Hunt, Dearness Johnson, maybe Demetric Felton makes a team. Maybe it's Jerome Ford. But whoever is in that position to be out there in that 11 personnel with Deshaun Watson, they're going to thrive, because imagine how thin that box is going to be if Watson's out there. And with that offensive line, that offensive line only has to worry about 6 people in the box. That's going to allow Kareem Hunt to get to the second level a lot. I mean, you can even throw Nick Chubb out there, but that's really where it's going to shine, where it's like, hey, now you have a certified player at that quarterback position, right? A player with a capital P, to where, teams ain't going to go beat us with Deshaun Watson.
Right. No,
that's
not
true. The MO, right? That's what this been with Baker, where it's like, we'll see if Baker beats us today, and if he does, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't. We're going to leave him open. But with DW, it's different.
Mm-hmm. Nah, all good. Definitely is different for sure. Then what do you think some of the weaknesses for the Browns are?
I mean, I talked about it earlier. I think that the defense, I don't know how Quincy feels about it. He's probably a lot higher than I am on the defense. I think a lot of guys that
he got his boy over there though. He got his boy on that D line now.
Oh, Perry on Winfrey. Who Ogunjobi Jr., who makes all these explosive plays and doesn't finish them, much like Zach Carter does finish them and has more sacks. That guy? Okay, cool. So on the other hand of it, like when you look at the Bengals linebacker core, I think you look at like a Logan Wilson, a Jermaine Pratt, and guys that have proven it at the highest level. I think they're still like trying to figure out things about JOK. And JOK from an athletic profile can do a lot of things that our linebackers can't. I think that when the Browns play the Bengals, it's just a bad matchup from the gap scheme that they do, and they went up front. You have timely turnovers and stuff at the beginning of the game and all these different things like that, and it puts them in favor in a lot of these matchups for one of the best running team in football. The one thing that I think that I don't have a problem with is like what you were just saying about Deshaun Watson. I think they stay with that same concept of running the football, doing what they do best, and ask Deshaun Watson to move the ball on third down and move the chains and just make the simple plays. And then whenever I need to get back in the game and go win the game, I now need you, Deshaun Watson, in the fourth quarter to take over on your Joe Burrow-ish type, whatever. That's the part where I asked about like the Jacoby Brissett thing, is because if things don't go your way, then I think that's a tall task for Jacoby Brissett to try to come back to in a lot of these games. I think the defense, I was listening to him earlier on talking about a lot of things that he thought were wrong with the offense. This is why I brought that up. In the defense, there are a lot of players that I think that you might be high on. You could tell me if I'm not. But in their last games that we were talking about, they gave up 300 yards to the Steelers, 311 Packers, 328, 389, 303, 452 to the Patriots, 348, 370. The teams that they got under 300 yards were like the Lions. You know what I mean? So like the defense is unproven in a lot of different areas. I think their defensive interior, very key. The interior defense of the Browns is going to be asking a lot of Perion Winfrey year one to be like this animal, like year one. And the linebackers, like I said, are still unproven. And I still feel like I can go and have my way with Grant Delpit. I think Amari Cooper is a guy, if you ask a Cowboys fan, he checks in and out of a lot of games. He's always going to be a consistent force in the league. But in all of his tenure, 9 years later in the league, he's never eclipsed 1,100 yards. So that's a lot. When you're talking to like the Bengals about like wide receiver play and stuff like that, does he have to do that much? No. But if they're saying that he's going to be a number one, and I got Deshaun Watson now throwing me the football, 1,100 yards that's Tyler Boyd like on a yearly basis. You know what I mean? So like, I don't buy into the wide receiver core. I never bought into Donovan Peoples-Jones, as you know. I think he's like one of these guys that we hear about every single year of my life, and I'm so sick of it. I do love, Tyler Boyd 2.0 is the kid Bill, who I love. I absolutely love him. Cut on his tape, he looks like a young Tyler Boyd at Pitt. I think he's amazing, and I think they're going to get a lot out of him. But I just see the weaknesses mainly being in the defense. And a lot of the Browns fans that I talk to, they don't see that. But when I go watch games and stuff, they gave up a shitload of yards in a lot of these games.
I would say in response to that, the yardage might be misleading because of the number of possessions the offense allowed the defense to, or the offense gave the defense, right? A lot of possessions where they went for it on fourth down in the red zone, did not convert, threw the defense out there, defense forced a field goal. A lot of possessions where they just didn't get any yards, right? And the defense got tired later in these games. I think if you have a more consistent offense out there, some of those numbers will come down just because what the nature of what we saw on like the advanced statistics and what we saw from a play-per-play basis when they really needed it last year. I mean, like they were able to get Aaron Rodgers off the field like 3 times in a row in that fourth quarter to still give the Browns a chance before Baker Mayfield threw that interception at the end of that game. So, they did some very impressive stuff against some good players last year. I mean, Lamar Jackson forced 4 interceptions in the game that they lost because they had terrible quarterback play in that game. So, I think there's a lot there to justify why I think the defense is going to be really good. If you go to weaknesses, I know people bring up linebacker. I don't know for me if that's a weakness, just because I know the Browns are going to run a lot of nickel, right? That's pretty much their base defense. So when they go into nickel, sometimes they do and have a nickel backer in there, and that'll be John Johnson instead of like Jermaine, instead of like one of the guys that you see listed on the depth chart at linebacker. It would be John Johnson and it would be JOK, and they like to go light there. That can hurt them in some cases because they don't have a strong interior. They don't have a strong, a big linebacking core. But I think that's what they're willing to sacrifice is that, hey, if you're willing to run, we'll put Miles and Jadeveon on the inside, let you deal with that, and then we can handle that from there. That's what the versatility that Jadeveon and Miles gives you, is that you don't necessarily have to have the greatest interior defensive line in the world, because Perion's not going to be asked to be a complete starter year one, right? They're going to put him in situationally where he might be in on some 5-2 front or something like that. But they're not going to put Perion out there, be every down 3 tech and say, go get him, because they're going to have different rotations that they're going to like to use with different players. So the way they look at that position is a little bit different. They don't look at interior defensive line as a starting position. They really look at it as a role position where they have
we in the North. You better stop the run.
The role. Well, I mean, we say that, but then when you play the Bengals, I would rather Joe Mixon have 125 yards than let Jamar Chase go off.
That's what I want to talk about too, because I can't wait to see Denzel Ward versus Uno Part 2. Because Denzel did his thing. I know me and Zim know that Jamar says that he has that matchup circled on the calendar. And I know Quincy, I know you love their secondary. I want to hear both of you guys' thoughts on that matchup, or just matchups that you guys are looking forward to. Because for me, the number one is Denzel Ward versus Jamar Chase 2.0. And I think, honestly, you could even extend that to the Migos versus the Browns secondary, because the Browns have the formidable corners to kind of match up with those dudes. So I want to see how that looks next season.
Now, it's kind of misleading, right, when you look at that one game, because the Browns did go in there and just play a ton of man with no help over top, and it just worked out. And part of that was they were playing good defense. another part of it was like Jamar Chase had a bad game. Like he dropped a couple passes. He had like one fumble. Like he had just like his worst game of the season at that point. So I don't know if that's necessarily the strategy that they're going to come into, be like, hey, we're going to play single high against the Bengals again and see if that doesn't murder us. We'll see what happens, right? That might be a game where Jamar Chase might break off a big one just because the Browns might feel like they can go single high again because it did have success. But I would be wary on that. Jamar Chase has done this against some of the best corners in football already. Denzel Ward is really good. He's one of the better corners in football, but I'm not about to put him out there like that, especially when he's not a corner and the Browns aren't a scheme where a corner is going to follow a number one wide receiver, which means if you motion enough, you can have Greedy Williams on Jamar Chase.
Ooh,
that's not something that I'm trying to see in zone because Greedy falls asleep sometimes, right? Like that can be an issue there too. So,
I like Martin Emerson to overtake him.
Oh, MJ, I thought they're going to use him like kind of in a slot, some in the boundary. I don't know.
Right. And I think, I mean, so correct me if I'm wrong. Wouldn't Greedy be in the slot as well, or they keep him only on the outside?
Greedy probably only going to be in there in dime. And I would say, yeah, he would probably be, when they go trips and they have the long wide receiver off the line of scrimmage, far off,
right.
He would be probably high off, playing high there, probably doing like a squat on the flat or something like that. That's probably what they would have Greedy. Greedy's not going to have that many responsibilities this year just because he's fourth or fifth on this depth chart right now.
Right. I think Martin Emerson, I really like him as I love his game too. I just think I referenced that because I know that some of Jamar's biggest games is we motion him to the slot. If you go watch the Ravens or the Chiefs games, 266 yards later, a lot of slot action, a lot of stuff like that. I thought one of the things that you said that I think you probably will look back on and be like, whoa, I wish I didn't say that about the Joe Mixon part, is that if you do go and commit to the passing game, and then you're telling me that that's your interior defense, we're 100% going to run. And you're going to see a healthy dose of Chris Evans and Joe Mixon, and we're going to run a lot. If you show me a six-man box, I'm absolutely going to kill you. I
think the Browns factoring in that is, yeah, sure, our interior tackle's not good, but if you keep the football closer to Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney, we feel good about being able to win those matchups on occasion enough to force enough third downs to where they can make some plays. So I think that's kind of the gamble that they're making, right? Is like, hey, our best player is Myles Garrett. Everybody else is really good on this defense, but Myles is the dude. So if you want to keep the ball near Myles, that is why I'm also on the other side, who's a better run defender than Myles. Technically,
that is why La'el Collins is so important for us because we never had a dude that could go toe to toe with Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, like you said, Quincy, has killed us in games. So that's another matchup I'm looking forward to is La'el versus Myles because I feel like, even though you already know how we feel about Clowney, we had a whole episode before Clowney was even on the Browns. Clowney.
And Clowney balled out this past season.
I'm like Jadeveon Clowney is gonna have to be the guy that I'm letting loose and not Myles Garrett. Like I'm not taking chances with Myles Garrett, and I hope that La'el Collins can be an X factor in that aspect.
This will be interesting. Like these matchups, if you just look at the roster throughout, the Browns and Bengals have the most intriguing stuff going on here, right? Because
the best rosters in the North.
Yeah, and then you have that trio of wide receivers versus the secondary that, I don't know if they match them blow for blow, but they have enough firepower to where you don't feel like that's going to be leaning horribly one direction or the other there. And then even then on the defensive line, there's some interesting matchups like y'all pointed out there. And then on the other side, you have the storyline of if it's Watson out there versus Joe Burrow. I've always compared. This is interesting now that they're both in the same division. I've been saying this since Joe Burrow was a rookie. I'm like, Joe Burrow really reminds me of Deshaun Watson, like when he was in LSU, where they were both kind of mobile guys, not the strongest arm, but enough zip and accuracy. And they just kind of had that it thing in the fourth quarter to where you just didn't want to bet against them, where they would just always show up in those moments in the most ridiculous ways possible. They would figure out, right? Deshaun had that one play when he was in Houston where he was blind and he still scored a touchdown with like 2 minutes left. I think their defense ended up losing that game, but he ended up tying the game or something like that. And then we all know about Joe Burrow's exploits, especially last year. So, yeah, I've always thought that those two players were more similar than the media. Like, you know how the media is. They like to comp Joe Burrow to other white quarterbacks just because that's what we've been doing forever. But I've always looked at Joe Burrow. People say like Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. I'm like, nah, man. He reminds me a lot of like Deshaun Watson when you watch both of them in college. So it's interesting to see that they're both there. Both are entertaining. I mean, could you imagine one of them double overtime battles with these two dudes now being able to go back and forth? Blow for blow, with the weapons on offense.
I feel like people are such a prisoner of like what they've seen recently, and I think they have forgotten how good Deshaun Watson is.
Bro, I do him ahead of Lamar Jackson. It was like a crime. And I'm like, it's Deshaun Watson. The last time I saw Deshaun Watson, he was playing at a crazy level. The last time I saw Lamar Jackson, it wasn't 2019 Lamar Jackson. Right. And so, like, if I'm going off of that, like, people kill me for that. But like Deshaun Watson is like up there. All three of these dudes is up there.
We're talking about it's a preference thing. It's a preference thing, and then also too, you got to factor in like there's going to be a large demographic of people that say Deshaun Watson played at the MVP level, and then you're going to have the Lamar person to say, "Well, I actually won it.
He actually had one." Right?
Think about
what I mean.
And I think this will probably put a bow on it, but in this division, there's the potential to have three quarterbacks who would not be absurd to get MVP votes in the same season. I don't know where that, like, people hype up the AFC West about, oh, there's a good quarterback on every team, but there's one really good quarterback. There's Justin Herbert, who we feel like is going to be really good, but we don't really know because he ain't really accomplished much outside of some statistics like last year. And then there's Derek Carr and there's Russ, and Russ is Russ, but he's not Russ anymore, right? Like he's had his step back. So we don't know what it is.
I don't know.
But if you know,
that's Dem's old lab partner. He gets a little emotional when it comes
No. I mean, I think Russ was in a bad situation last year. And if you're telling me Russell Wilson fourth quarter, I gotta go against Jacoby Brissett or Russell Wilson, I want to go against Jacoby Brissett. And then if you're talking about Herbert, we're talking about a rookie of the year. Then the guy comes back and throws for 5,000. Like, nah, like dude is crazy, insane, crazy accurate, has the arm talent, arm angles, throws from any platform. I don't think he's better than Joe Burrow, but the combination of Pat Mahomes.
Is he better than Watson? I think like Lamar, Watson, and Burrow is hard to like beat that.
Watson never elevated up. Like people talk about some of those teams. Like some of those teams were really, really good. And Watson, I judge him a lot, and we haven't seen that from Herbert yet. But Watson's playoff performances weren't really that good. There's a lot of that's a long discussion. That's why I'm on Twitter space. Like you'll have like Texans fans coming in, like they break down every element. This conversation we've had, I've had this conversation where we compare Deshaun Watson to Lamar all the time.
Real quick, then. All right, y'all play. You both play spades, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If you had to say each quarterback in the North, let's throw out whatever Pittsburgh situation is, right? Because they're not really relevant here. But if you put a spade card, like if you had this card in your hand and that's the quarterback, what card is each quarterback, right? I think I put Joe Burrow. I think I put him as a low spade, like 4 for 6. Yeah, I think I put him 4. I think I put him 6 out of the NFL. So I put him as a low spade to where if it's not Hall of Fame, you probably taking Joe Burrow over them at this point. Lamar, I probably put him in that same category as him. And then Deshaun, I put as a high face card, where it's like most guys he's much better than. But you still kind of are waiting for that. You're still kind of waiting to see if he could trump everybody, right? Because if you go up with Deshaun against Patrick Mahomes, you feel good about it, but you also go and you know Patrick's the better quarterback, right? That's the thing with Joe Burrow's. Like when Joe Burrow goes up against Patrick Mahomes, I really don't think it's that like it's uneven. I think it's even at that point to where either dude can win that one. If it's Deshaun Watson, you gotta wait to see him do that before you can crown him as that. So that's why
the difference is Joe Burrow did play him twice.
That's what I'm saying.
Joe Burrow outdueled him twice.
That's what I'm saying. That's why Joe Burrow is a spade, because he can beat everything that you throw in front of him.
I got you.
And that's why I would say.
But I'm saying, you said you would name 5. You would name 5 quarterbacks in front of Joe Burrow right now.
I would put 5. I think 5 or 4. He's top 5 at that point. Like,
all right. Yeah. I mean, I feel like at that point, look, we've been
at that point, ain't even worried, right?
We're just,
he's not
you know what I'm
holding you
saying?
back.
It's like a preference thing, whatever. I think Deshaun Watson could be in that same realm or whatever, but Lamar is like kind of like outside of the beat. I just look at them playoff games from him, and I'm just like,
and I think Deshaun looks at that, right?
That's a big difference when you start talking Lamar to me. Like 1-3, 0-2.
His record is actually better than Lamar's, though. His record.
No, I said
Lamar.
Oh, you said
I'm talking about Lamar.
Worse.
Like 1-3, 0-2, two fumbles.
It's not the same. It's not the same.
I mean, you know, and I know we got to wrap this up. You know, a lot of what we talk about, like the great quarterbacks, when people talk about Joe Montana, it isn't because of his numbers. It's like, what did he do in big moments? It's the playoffs. When you talk about like
Giannis moment, where
you know what I'm saying, like
people where Giannis won like 2 MVPs, but people are like kind of sick of seeing him go out in the second round all the time, and it's like, you know, is he gonna be it in the playoffs or is he not? Somebody in the crowd is like, explain that in football terms, because they don't even watch basketball. They're watching. Yeah, but he's at that. Well, it was like with Peyton Manning, right? Where Peyton kept losing early in his career in the playoffs, and then finally he overcame it, and then you stop looking at Peyton like that, right? As a dude who chokes in the playoffs. You know, there's this balance between being Phillip Rivers, a dude who we know is really good, but nobody really is afraid of Phillip Rivers like that, and then being somebody who Joe Burrow kind of proved that, where it's like, no, you play Joe Burrow in the playoffs, dog. He slayed Patrick Mahomes. Like, you worried about that one, right? You don't want to give him 2 minutes left. But that's kind of the moment that Lamar's in. I'll give him this one last year, right? If he does it again in the playoffs, that's going to affect how I rank him going forward. But I will give him this because he got to the playoffs before anybody else in this draft class. He kind of gets held against with stuff that's not really his fault. But you know, I'll give him this last year. If he falters in the playoffs again, now it becomes a real stigma, and it's already building on him.
If he makes the playoffs,
I'll give him this.
But Q, we want to thank you
for
being generous with your time. Please let the people know where they can find your stuff.
YouTube.com/Quincy Carrier. You can find me if you want to get my Browns coverage. If you want to see me react to these national media people, I actually did one with Ace not too long ago. Check me out at youtube.com/worst take. Also AFC North talk. I work multiple jobs on this YouTube thing. I'm always somewhere on the internet. And if you want to argue with me, catch me on Twitter at Quinn_C, where I argue with people pretty frequently. I'm trying to stop. I'm trying to stay.
Man, come on those spaces, man. I'm telling you, come in there and listen. Even if you don't talk, just come in there and listen. You're gonna love it.
Send me the invite. I like spaces. I'll check it out.
Definitely. All right. Well, we appreciate that. And next, we'll be moving on to our sponsor of the show, Midwest Best Barbecue.
Wings, got you with them Bono wings. Bono wings. They tell me that the Bono wings will make you do the gritty. The Bono wings will make you do the gritty. Bono wings. Bono wings. Come and get them Bono wings. Bono wings. Who they gonna beat them Bono wings? Bono wings. Jimmy's got you with them Bono wings. Bono wings. They tell me that the Bono wings will make you do the gritty. The Bono wings will make you do the gritty.
Shout out to Midwest Best Barbecue, located in Loveland, 669 Justice Court. Go get your brisket fries. Go tell them Ace and Zim sent you. Bro, speaking of PFF projections, as Quincy talked about, he talked about PFF. They released some projections, bro. I don't think we really like these projections that they put out there. It seems like they don't expect the Bengals to really improve that much. If you're at home listening, 4,600 yards for Joe Burrow passing wise, 816 for Tyler Boyd, 1,100, almost 1,200 for T, 1,400 for Jamar, 1,000 rushing yards for Joe Mixon. Even though we have Lyle Collins and an improved line and all of this, these are the numbers. For me, I'm going to say it like this. Joey B is probably going to be way closer to 5,000, maybe even over 5,000 yards, I think, in this offense. Joe Mixon, 1,000 yards. That sounds like Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis numbers. That's not happening, bro. Not with the extra game. I think he's at least getting 1,300 yards, bro. Tyler Boyd, 816. No, Tyler Boyd gets 1,000 yards in his sleep. I'm not, 816, bro. Yeah, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. That sounds like Rashad Bateman numbers. Okay. So for me, that's where I see it. Zim, what do you disagree with on these projections as well?
I'm not really crazy. Like, I don't feel like it's that off, but if you're telling me that they did all of that with a bad
you don't think 816 is that off for Tyler Boyd?
I mean, like 200 yards off, is that a
Yes.
lot? Okay. All right. So, but this is what I was going to say is like, it's not a bad projection if one guy, like say Joe Mixon goes for 1,500, 1,600 yards, then I'm not looking at all the other numbers like they're crazy, or vice versa. Joe Burrow goes for 5,200, then I'm looking at Joe Mixon like clearly they just threw the ball a lot. You know what I mean? But I just think that it was kind of weird that they just gave them pretty much the same stat line that they had the previous season. I think me being I'm trying to take my Bengals bias out of it, just adding this offensive line, I just would think that most of these numbers would be inflated by like 150, 200 yards minimum. I think Joe is a shoo-in for 5,000 if he plays the full season. Like, I just don't see a world that doesn't exist. I know some people say, well, he got 500 in the Ravens game. That's cool. He didn't play in the last game of the season with the Browns. I think there's a lot of games where he was on a pitch count where he would have threw for more as well, too.
Yeah, bro. Yeah. These numbers seem good if we're going to have the first round bye wrapped up by like week 16, sure. And we just sit out 2 games. I'm not with this, bro. This is crazy. 816 for Tyler Boyd. I'm not rocking with that. 46, like the 1,050, like, nah, bro. We could sign Jeremy Hill right now off of the couch, and he's putting up that number. Like, he's
you know why I'm not as crazy on it. I think you taught me this last season, and I was so gung ho on all 3 wide receivers getting 1,000 yards, and I think I was talking about another stat. He was like, "What difference does it make if we win?" And I'm like, "Yeah,
that's true."
So at the end of the day, I am looking at it like, "Shit, we go to the plailers, and I do what I just did.
We go to the playoffs.
Yeah, like I don't care. I don't care if Joe threw for 3,000 and Joe Mixon threw for 1,000. I don't care how we get there as long as we go. So part of me is saying that I'm hearing like your voice in the back of my head.
Nah, for sure. Appreciate B Sewell on that. Well, you guys know that you can catch the Wincinnati Podcast on YouTube. Go to YouTube, type in Wincinnati. You'll be able to find all of our shows. Don't forget we had other shows, the Bengal Pulse, the 513, the New Wincy. We have all of those. But you can catch us on Thursdays and Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also catch Zim's Cat if you're watching live. So please be sure to hit that comment button. Let us know what you guys are thinking about. Hit that subscribe button. We truly appreciate that. Once again, thanks to Quincy for appearing on the show, and we'll have more guests for you guys coming up next week on the Wincinnati Podcast.
Yes. Hello, world. We got a special show as always. TJ Houshmandzadeh, Jimmy Chase, Coach Jimmy Burrow. Time to be a Bengals
How do you balance being a professional athlete and family obligation?
He's your top 5 Bengals of all time.
All time? Shock the world.